Right. The last thing then that we're going to talk about in section 8.1 is we're going to talk about absolute value. Right. So absolute value. The absolute value of a number is the distance between that number and 0 on our number line. Right? So the key thing that we're thinking about for absolute value is that word distance. Right? The way we're going to indicate our absolute value, if we see in this example below, we have two vertical bars that are surrounding our number. Since absolute value is distance, right, that means that it's impossible to be negative. Right? When you're driving in your car, right, it doesn't matter which direction you're going, right, you're adding miles to your mileage on your car. Right? We're adding to our total. So distance doesn't matter if we're driving east or west, right? It's all going to be a positive number. Right? So when we're thinking about absolute value, our absolute value is either going to be positive or 0. Right? Absolute value of 0 is going to be 0. Absolute value should never be negative. Right? So in other words, I used one of our inequality symbols to show that our absolute value of any number is going to be greater than or equal to 0. So our absolute value of any number is always going to be greater than or equal to 0. Okay. So our absolute value of positive 12. Well, positive 12 is exactly 12 units away from 0 on our number line. So our absolute value of 12 is 12. Our absolute value of negative 5. Negative 5 is 5 units away. Right? Direction doesn't matter. Left or right doesn't matter. Right? We're 5 units away from 0 on our number line. 24. Right? Absolute value of 24 is going to be 24. We're 24 units away from 0. Absolute value of negative 1 is positive 1. Again, it's impossible to have a negative absolute value, so we want to make sure that absolute value is positive. Absolute value of 0 is always 0. So that's why we include the positive or 0 in our phrase. Right? If it's a non-zero number, our absolute value is always positive. If we're plugging in 0, our absolute value of 0 is still 0. I do want to make a little note here. When we're dealing with negatives, the opposite of, so kind of combining some of our ideas that we've looked at together, this is the opposite of the absolute value of 2. Well, the absolute value of 2 is positive 2. So the opposite of that is going to be negative 2. Right? Now, if we put a negative sign inside, we actually get the exact same answer. Right? Our absolute value of negative 2 is positive 2. And then if we take the opposite of that now positive 2, that also gives us a negative 2. So as we continue to explore our integers and our signed numbers, this is going to be something that we might see later on in a section. So I just wanted to make a little note of it now. For the most part, what you're going to be dealing with and what you're going to be seeing as your examples, make sure you know your definition and make sure you know how to do basic evaluations of your absolute value, bars surrounding an integer inside.